Welcome to the Town of Basalt Planning and Zoning Commission meeting Tuesday, May 16th, 2023. Can we have a call to order, please?
Yes. Bill Marin,
Yo.
Kyle Oberketter,
Yes.
Eric Vozick,
Here.
Rob Levitt,
Here.
Cindy Hirschfield,
Here.
and Katie Hostetler.
Here.
Excellent. You have a quorum.
Excellent. First item then is approval of minutes from April 18th, 2023. Do we have any concerns, questions?
Were they
Changes?
on the property to deal with this, either stormwater or the floodplains? Were they building a retention pond or a detention pond?
Should be detention.
It's detention.
Yeah.
Okay. In that case, no changes to the minutes.
Any
Actually,
other?
wait a minute. Let me think about that a minute. It's probably retention pond.
In that case, have the minutes reflect that substantial change?
Do we have any other changes? If not, do we want to entertain a motion with the one change on the retention pond?
Motion to approve with the language change.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Second from Rob. All in favor? Aye. Motion carries 6-0. The next item then is Commissioner Training with Town Attorney Jeff Conklin.
Thank you. Good to see you all. It's always, I don't get to come in front of the P&Z very often, and I think most of the times I do, there are looks of concern on your face, like, why are you here? But it's always good to check in and do a little training, a little refresher on some of the important principles of kind of the rules of the road when you're sitting in those chairs. Some of you guys have been at this for a while, and some are new, and so, but it's always good to have a refresher, and if you're hearing some of this for the first time, you may have questions, and if anyone has questions, just feel free to interrupt me. But I wanted to cover four main things, just the types of actions that you all take as the Planning and Zoning Commission, special rules that apply when you're acting in a quasi-judicial posture, quick overview of a couple of the important principles in our code of ethics, and then just a couple of open meeting law reminders. And again, if you have any questions, just interrupt me. So as Planning and Zoning Commissioners, you are, of course, a commission of the town of Basalt. You largely make recommendations to the town council, but on certain things, you are the final decision-making body. But you're really generally acting in two different types of capacities, a legislative capacity and a quasi-judicial capacity. And so when you're in that legislative role, you're doing things that have a broad impact through town. And really, for you guys, that's code amendments. And when you're looking at how to amend the land use code, those have town-wide application. When you're in a quasi-judicial capacity, you're dealing with specific property interests, so usually a land use application of some kind. And when you're in that quasi-judicial posture, there are certain rules apply, and those rules arise from the state's constitution and the Colorado Constitution, all related to due process. So when a land use application is in front of you, there's a property interest at stake. And when you're dealing with a property interest, you have to provide due process. And so what does that mean? You need to act impartially, and you, in a fair and impartial matter. And one of the ways where an area within that becomes a concern, or to be aware of, I guess, when you're acting as a planning commissioner, is what would cause due process to be, where are the areas where due process could go wrong. And one of the main areas is when you have ex parte contacts. And so when you're, again, in that quasi-judicial role, you're acting like a judge, and you need to deal with the property interest in front of you based on the information that's presented at the hearing, whether it's be through the packet materials or the testimony that's presented by the applicant and by staff. And that doing that is what ensures the impartiality and the fairness of the proceeding and to meet due process. And so what is an ex parte contact? An ex parte contact is really a discussion with, outside of the hearing room. And it could be with, a member of the applicant team, it could be a citizen, it could be staff in some cases. And it becomes a problem because, again, it's a conversation that is occurring not in this meeting room for the benefit of all of council to hear it. It creates the potential for potential influence of a certain commissioner. And it also presents a problem in that, in some cases, information that might be presented to you by this person, the applicant, a citizen, any other person, the applicant might, in some cases, might have an opportunity or a right to like cross-examine or ask questions of a person providing testimony, and that opportunity is lost if they're providing information or to you when you're not sitting here, when they're not providing comment here or here. So those are ex parte contacts, and so then the next question is, well, what do you do about it if you have an ex parte contact? And there's kind of the proactive things you should do and the reactive things. And generally, if somebody comes up to you and says, hey, I want to tell you about the whatever application that's going on, I want you to hear what I have to say about it. I think your first line of defense is say, I would really love to hear it, but in order for me to consider it as part of my role as a planning and zoning commissioner, as part of this land use process, you need to come to a meeting and provide that as public comment, or put your comments in writing and submit them to staff, and they can get them in as part of the packet. It's a small town. This happens all the time, where people come up to you and want to tell you what they think about an active land use application. And I think sometimes it's hard not to want to engage in that, because you're obviously interested in the subject matter of it. That's why you're here. But as a result of you being here, you kind of can't. And until an application until it's over, and there's a final decision made on it. So that's kind of the first line of defense. Really like to hear it, but please, if you would like me to, here's how to do it. And I'll say sometimes it's an easy out, in that while you might be interested in those conversations, sometimes they can be uncomfortable, and you can kind of avoid that by saying that, like, look, I really just can't engage in this. Please come to a council meeting.
Can I ask you a question about
Sure.
that?
Yeah.
So how does that work? Like, what's the line? I guess more like a council person than us. If somebody approaches you and wants to share an opinion about something, council people need to know what their constituents think, right?
Yeah.
So how do you? Is that the answer? Like, as a council person, you're just supposed to say, "Don't tell me, come to a meeting," or like, how else would you know what people are?
Well, it all depends on what they want to talk to you about. So if they want to talk to you about the parking rules in town, I think the parking rules should be changed for this and this reason. That's a legislative matter. It's a broad application in town. Sure, listen, engage. That's something that's totally appropriate for those types of conversations. But when it's an active land use application, so if there's, one that's been completed, so the Basalt Center Circle, if you guys are in the midst of your review of Basalt Center Circle and your neighbor wants to tell you, hey, here's what I think about this, and or why you should or should not vote against it, or some piece of information about it, that's the type of thing that, in order for you to properly hear and consider that information, they need to bring it in here. But things that aren't active land use applications, they're free to have those types of conversations. Yeah. But again, as I was saying, a lot of times these are unavoidable, and even if you try to do the proactive approach, well, it's hard to stop it sometimes. So what we do as a reaction to that? The reaction is let the three of us know, and then you can disclose it here in a meeting and say, I was contacted by so-and-so, I instructed them to come to the meeting, but, they told me this, and here I am presenting it on the record. And so then everyone that's a commissioner can have the benefit of that information. It's not like a perfect cure in every situation, but that's really the way to cure most of these ex parte conversations, is to make them as part of the record and describe them in as much detail as possible. Those are the main things I wanted to cover on quasi-judicial procedures and those ex parte contacts. I'm just looking at my notes to make sure I didn't forget anything. But, are there any questions on that? Yeah, I guess just to conclude, it's really about the record. You need to base your decision on the record, and what's part of the record is what gets presented in the packet or through testimony in this room, and that's what that's what supports any decision you make, either for or against an application. If someone is going to allege, say you deny a land use application, if someone is going to allege that there was a problem with how the proceeding occurred, one of the first things they would probably go after is, an ex parte conversation, something that disrupted the procedural due process to which they were entitled. So the next thing I wanted to cover were just code of ethics, and the town of Basalt has a code of ethics that is in its municipal code, and a couple of the main points that are relevant for you all relate to basically when you have a conflict of interest. And the code provides that you guys are officials of the town in your role as commissioners, and you can't take an act that directly and substantially affects your economic benefit, anything in which you might have a substantial financial interest, or if you're engaged as counsel, consultant, or representative or agent. And so, to explain that a little bit, if there's an applicant on a land use application in front of you, and you are, the landscape architect on the application, you're a consultant to the subject matter of the application, you have a conflict. If the applicant is a company and your wife works for the applicant, ski company or something, trying to think of people that regularly come through here, you have a conflict of interest. Substantial financial interest, that phrase I use, is also defined in the code as, and I'll just read it, it's defined as a substantial interest in a business held by an individual, which is an ownership interest, a creditor interest, an ownership interest in real or personal property, a loan or debtor or creditor interest, a directorship or officership, employment or prospective employment relationship for which negotiations have begun. And then those same things would apply to an officer's spouse or dependent children. So you can kind of start to think of, all right, here are the different ways that this might affect me. I own a piece of property that the applicant is, or let me rephrase this, Eric owns a piece of property where the applicant is, has maybe a contract on and has a land use application, and that's all contingent. Conflict of interest, or or your wife would have that, or if you have a loan to the applicant. Those are all areas of where there would be that conflict. So then the next question is, well, what do you do if you have a conflict of interest? Disclose it, and then the easiest thing to do is to then recuse yourself and just leave the room altogether and not participate. Because you have a conflict, you may, or because I guess you may be interested in continuing to observe or participate or see how a particular application moves forward, but the easiest thing to do is just leave the room, so then there's no possibility for you to be accused of attempting to influence others by your mere presence. So that's one of the main hallmarks of the Code of Ethics as it relates to conflict of interests. A couple others. This is kind of
one of the things I've seen people do over the years is even if they've had a past contractual relationship with a party that's has an application, you still disclose it, even though you don't have a current application, a current financial
Right.
relationship with them, just to, because in a small town, that happens a lot.
Sure.
So it's.
Yeah, and that would be a good thing to do. In the event, it's not something that that would constitute a conflict of interest, but it might be something that people might think may, or create an appearance of a conflict, to disclose it. And then if there's an issue where you're worried because of this past relationship that it might create an appearance of impropriety, that's another opportunity for you to recuse yourself.
Yeah.
It's not mandatory, but it's, you know, it would avoid any potential allegation of a conflict, I guess. A couple of the other main things under the Code of Ethics, and this is an obvious one, but you can't accept gifts from an applicant. So, you know, I have a application coming up, you know, and here's free concert tickets to whatever. There's an intent element to that where the intent of the gift should be to improperly influence the decision. But if there are things that are just kind of incidental, you know, that it wouldn't necessarily constitute a gift. But there's a dollar amount that is set at which you can't receive a gift, or if it's something that's received that has a value of greater than amount, it's kind of assumed to be a gift, and that's $65. That may have gone up with inflation, but it's right around that mark. So don't accept gifts.
If you're a Supreme Court judge, right, then it's okay.
I'm not their attorney. Last one is, you may, as a result of being commissioners, end up having access to confidential information, or information that may be through an executive session, or information that may not be generally available to the public. And there's a rule that you can't use or disclose confidential information acquired in the course of your duties to substantial your personal financial interests. So, say you guys probably wouldn't really be involved in this kind of thing, but something that comes to mind is the town's interested in buying a piece of land. You're in an exec session. Oh, the town's going to offer $1 million for this. You know, you go and, or, you know, get ahead of the town, and you've used this confidential information to then broker a deal with the owner of the property. That's the type of thing that would be precluded. I mean, these are somewhat obvious examples. But as you get closer to the gray area in some of these rules, just ask. You know, always be proactive if you have any concerns about any potential ethical issues. Any questions on Code of Ethics? Okay. The last thing I wanted to cover were just some basics under the Open Meetings Law. All meetings of the town council and its commissions and boards are open to the public under the Colorado Open Meetings Law. And the definition of a meeting is where there are potential issues and triggers under the Open Meetings Law. This is very obviously a meeting. It's noticed at least 24 hours ahead of time. It's apparently on TV. I did not know that. The planning commission was, and it's open to anyone that might want to come in here. But what else is a meeting? There are inadvertent meetings, and it's anytime 3 or more commissioners are gathered for the purpose of discussing public business. And if you happen to see each other out at a restaurant, 3 or more of you get dinner or something, that's not a meeting. But if you're saying, hey, let's get together so we can talk about our plan for, for parking regulations. Sounds exciting. That's a meeting. That's a meeting under the law. And with that, you have to meet the requirements of the Open Meetings Law of public notice, and it's got to be open to the public. Those types of things can also occur by email or electronically or by phone. And so you just have to be extra careful of, I want to get everybody's thoughts on potential code amendments on parking here. Here are my thoughts. I'm going to send them around to everybody, reply maybe we can get this figured out before we get into the meeting, the real meeting. That's a meeting. That would be a violation of the open meetings law. It can also happen through, you can have open meetings law violations through serial meetings. So, if there's an idea of, we'll avoid getting 3 of us together, but if Katie, you decide, I'm gonna talk to Rob, and then I'm gonna talk to Bill, and then I'm gonna talk to Eric, and we'll get the plan all hatched before this meeting starts, that's an open meetings law violation. It's a serialized meeting. The openness requirement is, executive sessions are exempt from that requirement. Executive sessions, I don't think we've had one for Planning and Zoning Commission since I've been the town attorney, but that's most often to receive legal advice. And sometimes that could very well come up in your guys' role when you're reviewing a land use application. And, we need to, maybe we need some legal advice as to better understand the bounds of our authority on something, or, any legal matter that might come up that could affect an application, or in general. That would be a topic for executive session. And there are specific procedures that you have to follow to convene an executive session. I won't get into them here, but that's kind of when the openness requirement is not required. And those are the basics of what I wanted to cover under the open meetings law. And I'll stop there for questions, and then for Michelle and James to just lob questions if you think there anything else you wanted me to touch on.
Here's a big one.
All right.
When someone sues us as a board or sues us as commissioners individually, which has happened to me.
Yep.
Notably Grace Church, because of something somebody said. And I think it really boiled down to one of the commissioners said something prejudicial against a religious entity. And that seemed pretty arcane at the time, but are there any guidelines for us to avoid situations like that?
Sure, yeah. So in your role as the Planning and Zoning Commission and as individual commissioners, you guys are protected by the Colorado Governmental Immunity Act, and you also have insurance protection from the town's insurance company, CIRSA. And so you do not have individual liability so long as you're acting within the scope of your employment authority, and so your scope of duties. So if you are acting as a planning and zoning commissioner and you're evaluating a land use application and you're making comments related to the application, somebody might sue you based on that decision, but you still have, you're protected from individual liability because you're acting within those scope of duties. If you as the planning and zoning commissioner decide, I'll just keep using parking, I don't know why, but I'm trying to think of a good example. We don't have parking meters, but if we did, I don't like these, let me think of a better example. But I guess you lose your immunity when you go outside of the scope of your scope of your duties as the planning commissioner. So if you start doing things that are, either the role of staff or just inappropriate at all, I'm going to start issuing parking tickets, or something like that. That's not your job. And you would potentially be subject to personal liability for types of things like that. Now, there can be, like anything, some gray area, and individuals will get named as defendants in lawsuits, but it will still be the town will defend you, and you're protected from individual liability so long as you're acting within the scope of your duties.
It's still really scary, even if you're getting defended,
Yeah, seeing your
especially in
name,
federal court.
seeing your name in a lawsuit
Yeah.
is not where you want to be. But sometimes, as a role of being a public official, and being in a position of having to make decisions, people will be aggrieved by your decision and may pursue whatever potential legal remedies they think they might have, whether they're wrong or they're right, and that's just part of the role as a commissioner sometimes. luckily, you're in the position of having those liability protections, and then the town's insurance and defense counsel, and available to help in those situations.
Is
So-
it?
Mr. Go ahead, just, I want to talk about that one subject just a little bit more.
There you go.
In regard to that subject, I'm speaking to staff now. If there's something comes up that has the potential for that, which was a civil rights violation, just because of something we would say, I think it would behoove us to have an executive session with the attorney beforehand, if you see there's any possibility of that, because it is really, really frightening to go through that,
Mhm.
and I wouldn't recommend it on anybody.
When was that?
Oh, shoot, like 15 years ago?
Oh, okay.
That was a sticky one.
It was a sticky one. It was a sticky, one of the commissioners said something that was taken by the church as being, was it impinging upon the decision we reached was impinging upon their civil rights
Mhm.
under a certain part of the Constitution, and that it was pretty arcane, but still nonetheless, it went on for a long time.
Oh, man.
Cost the town a lot of money.
Really?
So that would, we could, because I don't want to be the one who says something stupid. That's where I'm going with this.
Understood. Well, like anything, if you feel like you're in a gray area, then ask the question. Can help keep you on the right side of it. Kyle, do you have a question?
It's kind of a two-part question. It kind of leads in, maybe kind of ties in what Bill's saying. But one is, do we have to be careful during, question and comment section? Question, asking questions that are of curiosity and not within purview of the code that we are being presented.
I mean, ultimately, your decision has to be rooted in the review criteria under the code. And if there's a question that is somehow relevant or there's a nexus to those review criteria, then that's appropriate. If you start asking questions about the applicant's personal life or something,
So I guess I'll use, so the BCC project, we got into a lot of discussion about the viability of the supermarket as a business. Was that is that within our purview to look at if we think a business is viable versus what is in the code, and that in the code it stated that a grocery store is something that they could do?
So it's a permitted use. I mean, I could see how maybe some relevant questions would be, just that with a space of that size, is this, explain to us why you think this is an appropriate use of that space, something like that. I think there could be a tie in there.
But in the code, it states it literally stated a grocery store.
Right.
And we were questioning whether that was an appropriate use.
Not appropriate, but viable.
Viable.
Mm-hmm.
Was again, and it's of interest and concern of a project, and but is it within the purview of a land use code for us to be asking those questions?
I tend to think that would probably be fine, probably be okay if it's, because really the question is, explain to us why you think this is a good idea. And the good idea is there, it's only, the explanation would necessarily require that the proposed use is one that would succeed, and there's probably tie-ins within that concept to the comprehensive plan elements of ensuring vitality in the downtown core. So I could see how there would be links between those types of questions and things that would be appropriate for you guys to consider in your review of the application.
Okay, yeah.
I think it's also good sometimes to have the discussion of how you got to a decision. You know, it's okay to have concerns and then acknowledge that it does meet the code criteria, but you, regardless of that, you have these concerns. That's a helpful tool when we go back, you know, when people are doing research into the history of decisions, and if something changes in the future, why did they do that, or were they ever concerned about these things? That can be helpful if it's relevant.
Sure. And it's on the comment section, providing input into your feeling about the project and like support versus not support, like, is that the role in which that is supposed to be used for before a vote occurs?
So are you asking,
We tend to show like a lot of support or distaste for a project. Distaste is the wrong word, but dislike
mhm,
in our comment section, which we always have.
yeah.
Like, is that an appropriate? Is that not a little bit biased of somebody pointing those exactly how they feel before a vote occurs?
I mean, if they have a tie-in to your review criteria, I mean, I think that's important for the decision-making process to say, I don't like the project because of X, Y, and Z, and for those reasons, I'm gonna vote no. And the X, Y, and Z have a tie-in to all of, you know, your different review criteria. And again, one of those big overarching review criteria is conformance with the master plan. And there's a lot of, what's the right way to characterize this, like feel good, big kind of planning concepts where a lot of your, sentiment, like, I just don't see how this fits or how this works in this area, would be appropriate, and they would tie in. So I think they go to support your decision one way or the other.
Here's an abstract question. Say if someone was going to, there was a legal opening for a pot shop, and they were, they met all the stated code criteria for a pot shop, but everyone on this board decided that smoking pot was immoral, and we all voted it down. They would probably have grounds to sue the town for that decision. Is that true?
Yeah. I mean, you guys would be, so the town, would be the town council making that decision. And so the way a land use application, quasi-judicial, or it's reviewed in quasi-judicial capacity, is challenged is most often through what's called a Rule 106 proceeding. Rule 106 is a rule under the Colorado Rules of Civil Procedure. And it's to say that the decision was made was either arbitrary and capricious, or the decision-making body lacked jurisdiction over the decision. And the jurisdiction, I'll just briefly say, is like it wasn't noticed correctly, or there was the wrong reviewing body. It's more of a procedural thing. The arbitrary and capricious challenge is a substantive one. It's you guys, you made the wrong decision. You can review this application based on these criteria, and your reason for the decision was based on not one of those. And it's a high standard. This is I won't talk about it other than to say this is a Rule 106 claim is the claim that we're currently involved with on the Guy v. Town of Basalt lawsuit. That's a Rule 106 claim. And so there's a high bar for review of that. There has to be basically a lack of evidence in the record that would, I'll try to remember the precise phrasing, but lack of any competence in the record that would go to support the decision. It's a high bar to clear on a challenge. And but that would be in this scenario, that would be the claim, and that's how it would be reviewed.
It could also be like an applicant, like everyone on the board really disliked.
Sure.
Something like that.
Yeah. Dislike, and not to go down this road, but there's a moral character component for certain types of applications like liquor licenses and in marijuana applications. So if somebody has a long criminal record and showing dishonesty, you know, they've have a liquor or a marijuana license applicant has a record of, you know, dishonesty based on crimes committed in the past, that might be a basis to review them, not because you don't like their mustache or something, you know.
I guess the last one, it's a procedural thing of, I think there's sometimes like, we don't talk a lot up here, it's like question, answer, go to the next one. But it like, your question brings up other people's thoughts. What is the appropriate time to like, raise your hand and be like, hey, that brought up an interesting point, like I have another question. I always feel like once you're done, like, please don't say anything else, which can be appropriate, but I just,
I think Eric chairs the,
just raise your hand.
Yeah.
Okay.
yeah.
If it's up to me, more conversation the better. I've never been told, shut it down.
Okay.
No, it is helpful that when the discussion, the questions are held specifically during the discussion or question, like the commissioner question time, just for the minutes and for us to follow that. But if there's something in the middle of a presentation that's just, that's stopping understanding what's going on, absolutely ask.
Now, I mean, I've had in the back of my head, that just brought up a thought for me, not legal per se, but, I follow Bill's lead and we just kind of each have our turn. I mean, when we're asking questions, I've always had this thought in my back of my head, instead of, if you don't have any questions, just open it up to everybody at one time, which I don't know if that messes with the record or.
It just can spin out of control sometimes, depending on who, we're all pretty orderly here, but sometimes it's not.
Fair enough. I mean, I just don't know. I've never thrown that out to everybody where my head's going, we can talk about it another time, but I've had that thought in my head, certain easy presentations, it's easy to do like that. There's 3 questions that we all come up with and that's it. But yeah, I can see other ones where it's.
Well, after a motion is made, there's usually discussion before the vote. Sometimes we fast forward through that, but that would be a time for actual
Back
discussion.
and forth, yeah.
Sure, or, I mean, after you've finished your questions of the applicant and staff, opportunity for discussion amongst the commission, and, somebody could begin by saying, I kind of like what I heard, it seems like this project ticks a lot of boxes, and somebody might then raise, you as the chair could then call them in and say, well, I don't know, because to me that seems like this, there's that opportunity for dialogue just amongst you guys, and usually after you kind of complete that, questions of the applicant and staff.
Yeah, I think that's just a rules of order question, and that's
Yeah.
really
Yeah,
your
it
call.
wasn't illegal, it was
Yeah.
just
No, but
Yeah, no.
discussing protocol and.
Yeah.
Well, if you guys think of other questions, just feel free to email or.
The applicant's not here. My only last one is, why did the lawsuit get thrown out on BCC of saying, like, he wasn't even eligible to submit a lawsuit? It was like, the headlines I remember reading.
I can't really talk about it right now because it's on appeal.
Oh, okay.
So, but I can share that another time.
Fair enough, yeah. Didn't know that.
Are you allowed to say I don't remember the grounds under which it was originally brought.
Well, the lawsuit is one of these Rule 106 claims that the decision was arbitrary and capricious. And then there was a motion to dismiss for lack of standing. To bring a lawsuit, you have to show an injury to a legally protected interest. The court agreed, and now that's on appeal.
But the 106 is not it's not an open meetings law thing.
Nope.
It's, okay.
Nope. Well, very good, you guys. Good to see you all.
You too, Jeff. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you.
I think I hear the applicant mulling around up there.
Oh, shoot. The guy.
Well,
Thought they'd walk in.
I did too. Jeff's intimidating.
What's that?
We were laughing at the applicants, you were just intimidating.
Oh,
They
yeah.
didn't want to come in.
Yeah.
My preschool teacher.
Really?
Conflict of interest?
He's always a troublemaker.
Always a trouble. seen it.
So big these days. It's his kids, not him.
Do you want to take Jeff's place up there when he's,
Although it's pretty cute, that would be funny, yeah.
See you soon.
Welcome. Next item on the agenda is a public hearing on 400 Alexander Lane application for a minor PUD amendment, and I will hand it over to staff.
yeah, thank you. Let me please share my screen here. This is a public hearing on an application submitted by NJS Kinder Cottage LLC, requesting a PUD amendment to change the commercial daycare use into a single-family residence with a home daycare at 400 Alexander Lane. The property subject to the application is about 11,000 square foot property that has one structure on it, and you can see the structure here. It's got a commercial daycare and a accessory dwelling on the second floor. It's known as Lot 1 of the Southside 4 PUD, and this is Alexander Lane here, and the view from Alexander Lane. It's zoned industrial PUD, and the daycare was permitted on the site, subject to a site-specific development approval in ordinance number 2 of 2017, so it was approved in 2017. As background, the Southside 4 PUD lots require or permit 2 structures per lot, one commercial structure and one residential structure. And the PUD also requires the commercial structure to be constructed prior to or concurrent with the residential structure on the site. The applicants have requested to turn the existing daycare into a single-family residence with a home daycare because they would like to continue to serve as childcare in the site, but they can't financially do so with the 30 kids that are covered under their commercial license currently. And the applicants can speak more to that as part of the applicant comments. The development review process is a minor PUD amendment, and it requires P&Z to make a recommendation to the council with public hearings at both the P&Z and town council level. In reviewing the application, staff has identified a series of discussion items that are in your staff memo, and we also have them up on the screen here. The first being consistency with the master plan. There are several goals in the master plan that speak to supporting childcare, and they're outlined in the staff memo. The applicants have indicated the only way they can continue to provide childcare on the site is to convert to the single-family house with a home daycare to support those goals. Related to consistency with the intent of the Southside 4 PUD, as I mentioned, the PUD was set up to have a commercial structure on the back portions of the lots in the Southside 4 PUD, and then a residential structure on the front part of the lot adjacent to Alexander Lane. In the intent, the commercial structures were to buffer the residential structures from the more industrial Myers Steel area, and that's the way the PUD was set up. However, 400 Alexander Lane is a little bit different than the other lots in the PUD, as you have another lot back to the north of the 400 Alexander Lane property, which acts as a buffer for the residential use. That being the case, staff believes that it still meets the intent of buffering the residential use from the more industrial Myers Steel area. Suitability of the structure for the single-family use with a home daycare. Currently, it combines an accessory unit with the daycare use. And the building can be converted easily for the single-family use with the home daycare. The applicants have not proposed to reconfigure the building, and the building department has reviewed the proposed change and believe it's appropriate related to the building code. In terms of vehicular access, they do have a vehicular access off of Alexander Lane. However, the applicants have controlled the property adjacent to it to the west, and you can see it here. It's the NJS Hobby Farm property. And the applicants have constructed a turnaround on that site, and the applicants propose to continue to use that turnaround for pickup and drop-off for the home daycare, and they continue to control that site. So the applicants have proposed to continue that arrangement. Other topics include the community housing mitigation. Because the structure on the site is detached and less than 3,000 gross square feet, it is qualified for the exemption for a detached single family from the commercial mitigation requirements. Traffic, in terms of the traffic, there is a reduction in the number of students that would be taken care of on the property. And that being the case, there would be a reduction in traffic based on the International Traffic Engineers Manual trip generation requirements. So there has not been a requirement in the draft conditions for traffic mitigation, as it's predicted that there would be a reduction in traffic from the change. And then vested rights, the town code typically requires or provides for 3 years of vested rights. The applicant has not requested any additional vested rights, and that being the case, they would have to change the use to the single-family house with the home daycare within that 3-year period from approval, or they'd have to come back in the future for another approval. So the conditions that we have in the draft memo.
James, I'm sorry, before you go on, did you touch on conversion back to commercial?
Yeah, conversion back to commercial. The conditions that we have in there require that if they were to convert back to commercial, it would have to be to one of the commercial uses that are in the PUD. There's a specific list, and it's a very small list of uses in the PUD that they could convert back to. That was one of the conditions. As I noted, the draft conditions also would require continuing to use the adjacent properties turnaround for the drop-off and pickup for the home daycare. And then also noted the applicants would have to update the PUD document and have it recorded that would include the use of the single-family residence and the home daycare on the site. And then, as I noted, there are 3 years of vested rights that are included in the draft conditions. So staff would suggest this evening hearing applicant comments, and then asking questions of staff and the applicant, and then taking public comments as it is a public hearing. And then providing commission discussion, and ultimately, if you're comfortable with the conditions, you could provide a recommendation to the town council. We have Mary Wolfer here this evening, also known as Miss Mayor. Mayor, do you have some comments for the P&Z?
You did a good job. I'm asking just because I want to be able to care for the children. I've been pretty much subsidizing parents since I created the farm in 12. And we had 65 or 70 families at all times with no funding whatsoever. It's just me, 3 banks, and my husband. And as you know, COVID hit us pretty hard. We've lost about 1.4 million and had to take $372,000 on a compounded interest at 3.75, and I'll pay it off when I'm 89 from the government. And I haven't charged the parents 1 penny more. So I can't, it's not sustainable. So I could be at Disneyland and charge parents $150 to $175 a day, and I would never or I can stay at my rate and go down. So some is better than none. So that's basically it. Nothing else would change. Just limit families, which is so heart-wrenching. But I will get the families that I'm through till next August. I've committed to all of them. And then if, with your permission, I will switch to a home care large license. Then I have to go through state and some process, and that happens every August for me. The parents are not gonna feel it because I limited wait list, unfortunately. So James has been amazing. He knew I was trying to figure out everything, and I've asked everyone and no one can help, and blah, blah, blah. So I just I have to do this for the community and make sure that it's there for some. And that would be the best way. So in January, I curtailed my wait list, and I didn't offer more spots because I'm 18 months to 2 years out. So I'm not gonna forsake anyone that way. If that makes sense, I'll get them all through. But it's becoming more exclusive, which is not what I want either, because I'll just have siblings, legacy, and alumni. And I have grandchildren alumni coming in, because I've done it for 42 years here now. So I just want to keep the rate low and take care of what I can. But I think a lot of people had a hard time in COVID, not just me.
No, but it's a burden.
Mm-hmm. But the kids haven't changed, so that's good.
That's good.
Yeah. So, any questions? I'm happy to answer.
Just gonna throw it out there. I guess, Cindy, questions?
Yeah, just so I understand the setup, is the daycare part, now, do you live in the red house that's next door?
That's teacher housing. I deed restricted and gave it back to the county for the teachers
Oh, okay.
because they wouldn't have any place to live.
And that's not, so the daycare is all in
Mm-hmm.
in the building that we saw, it's not in the other?
Before COVID, I had already spent a small fortune with Pickens County. You guys are so much easier. They were 4 years, 4 months, and $800,000 to get through their rules at the farm. And you guys were 9 months and $232,000 to get through for all the rules. So I had 65, 70 families before COVID, the day that we closed.
And then what will the number of families go down to with the,
It's gonna make me cry.
oh, I'm sorry.
20, 15? Yeah. Because whatever happened, all the phenomena happened for me too. A lot of parents used to come 2 or 3 days, but they're so coveted, the spaces now, they all took every day. So it knocked out a lot of parents. It's one more, that they're not giving in all your numbers and your wait list, because parents are so desperate. It's so sad, and they're not being able to have choice for what they want for their kids, because all the centers are amazing, but they feel so strapped, it's really sad.
Mm-hmm.
So it's gonna get better, it's got to. We're really excited about your Stotts Mill. That's gonna be awesome. I'm hoping that all works through and gets through. Michelle's amazing. She goes for it. That's awesome. Yeah. So, yeah, I would say that. Yeah, right now and a lot of times I have double siblings or sometimes triple at the same family at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And those kids are guaranteed a space.
And then you'll live in the building and,
We'll live in the ADU. We'll sell our house to just kind of
oh, got it.
breathe, so we don't have to charge the parents.
Okay, I have a better understanding now, thanks.
You're welcome. This is all contingent on state, though. Just so you know, they come once a year. They do a great job. They're very clear with their policies and where it's at and what it works, and Mark's been there forever, and he'll come and make sure, but I won't be doing it to a year from August 2024. Because all those parents I have been with me since they were little, and those kids don't go to kindergarten until 2024. So I had to do chicken or egg, which was first. I had to get them through, but I had to ask your permission first, if that makes sense. Otherwise, I would have refilled again in January, and then I would have had to forsake all those families next year. I had to kind of put the foot down, stopgap. So that's kind of.
No questions.
Yeah, there's a question for staff. Is daycare on the PUD list of approved businesses? And if not, why can't we leave it there for this property?
It is currently as part of the site-specific approval that was done in ordinance number 2, series of 2017, unallowed use, yes.
So it is on the list, so if someone wants to
Yeah, it was
convert
added
it
as a.
back to commercial and daycare, they can do that.
Yeah,
Yeah, so I did that in 2017. I did this whole process with you all.
Yeah, so we won't scrub that.
No,
This decision won't obviate the old one.
it simply adds the
Adds to
use
it.
of the single family with a home daycare.
Got it. That's all my questions.
Rob?
Yeah.
Just a minor one, James. This property is still allowed to have 2 structures,
Yes,
regardless of what we decide today.
Right.
Okay, and if the daycare were to ever go away, it could still have a commercial and a residential.
correct,
The commercial is supposed to be built first.
correct.
It's there.
And this is even though,
So this amendment would allow for that to swap, for the residential to be
Okay.
there before the commercial piece.
But if you switched it back, it has to go to commercial with the ADU before you could build a residential.
thank you.
I'm learning.
No questions from me.
That's all.
I don't have any questions either. That being said, it's a public hearing. We'll open up for public comment or questions at 6:59. James, you want to give the online spiel?
Yes, the online spiel is that in the second page of the online packet, which can be found at www.basalt.net, are instructions for joining the web meeting. And if you click on that link, or you can also call the telephone numbers. One number is 719-359-4580, and you enter the passcode, which is 691543, and the webinar ID is 827-9407-6744.
Thanks, James. There's no one here, it looks like. Should we give a few seconds online, or
Yes, please, just
just in case?
maybe another 10 seconds. and
Sure. Seeing as there's no one wanting to make any comments, we will close the public comment time at 7:01 and open this up for commissioner comments. Katie?
No comment.
I commend Mary on what she does, and I'm ready to make a motion.
I just wanted to say, I'm sad to see this. This is kind of going in the opposite direction from where it was when I started this process 30 years ago. And it still is going in the opposite direction, and I hate to see that, but
Yeah.
I see the efficacy of what you're doing, and I have no problem with that.
I'll echo Bill's comments there that we have a lot of new product that we're trying to build, yet losing current product, which something seems missing there.
I agree.
And I don't know if we're supporting those other products or if we have any access, but to help things that already exist, seems way more important than helping to build more.
I'm open to any suggestions.
I mean, my recommendation, again, from what we owe you, again, it sounds like you're basically running a nonprofit, but I can't
Yeah.
tell exactly, but do you pay real estate taxes? Things that
Yeah.
the people have control over that could help reduce costs.
I've paid $325,000 so far in real estate tax to keep open for the kids.
If there was things that we could,
It just went up 82% too. So,
Yeah, and I'm sure you guys are working behind the scenes very hard, and it's tough to see us.
I don't fit in the mold, so.
Yeah, and I will not claim to know enough about the subject matter, but it's tough to see us, again, building new, and yet we're losing what's already existing.
Maybe I'll win the lottery.
I don't have any additional comments.
Thank
I don't either, just echoing what everybody said. So, Rob, you said you were ready with the motion?
Yeah, I think Kyle made a really good point. I mean,
Yeah.
but, yeah, motion to approve as proposed by staff.
I'll second.
Second by Bill. Do you want to take a roll call or just a,
I think I will take a roll call.
okay, please.
Yep. Kyle Oberketter,
Yes.
Katie Hostetler,
Yes.
Bill Marin,
Yes.
Cindy Hirschfield,
Yes.
Eric Vozick,
Yes.
Rob Levitt.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Mayor, good luck.
Thank you. Yeah, we'll be good. I worry about the other families. Thank you. Here to help with whatever I can. James is awesome.
That we
I've
know.
bugged him so much. Thank you, James. Take care.
Have a good night. Next item, last item on the agenda, commissioner comments and staff updates.
I do have a question before you get started.
Uh-huh.
What's the utility work that's happening out by City Market?
Yeah.
The fiber?
Yeah, that's
there's
fiber.
across the-
They're,
That's CDOT fiber?
it's CDOT fiber, but they're also putting in shadow conduit for the town as
Oh,
well.
I thought they already did that.
Me too.
They put in part of it, and so this is kind of the rest of it.
Yeah.
So it's what they were doing last year, too. Is this the same as that? Okay.
Right, they had some drilling challenges last year with the rock and the cobble. That's an understatement, that's why. So they're on to the second option here.
Is that like literally running like all the way down to Glenwood at some point, like that?
No, the way it's set up, at least for the part that's being done now, is from Elgibel Road intersection up to Original Road. And it was kind of part of the Tree Farm and Willits Town Center approvals that they had to install that fiber so that the lights would talk to each other. There is fiber that is coming up from the Carbondale area, but it's not on the Highway 82. It comes back from, I think, Catherine Store Road, and it's on some of the utility poles. And so there are some connections. The fiber that's in place, I think, comes up to close to the River Ranch subdivision, which is on the west side of Willits Lane there. And so we have some fiber companies that are actually connecting into that fiber that comes in on the Holy Cross poles. And so they're starting to serve Willits Town Center with that fiber. And then they're also going up to serve some of the Eagle County properties on the west side of Willits Lane. So, you know, it's slowly but surely kind of expanding into the town. And you know, the town's shadow conduit requirements have really helped that, because we've had some shadow conduit that's been installed, so now they're able to push the fiber through into some of those Willits buildings, which has been helpful. And we're doing license agreements with these fiber companies to ensure that, you know, the town has the ability to use that conduit in the future as well, so.
I'll throw another question at you. I don't know if it's on the Jadwin property or right next to the Jadwin. What are they clearing over
Yeah,
there?
that's a great question.
I think what you're seeing is, construction staging for the Midland Streetscape project. So,
Gotcha.
all those nice pipes that were pre-ordered. Yes. Any other questions?
Are you getting COs here on the River Park residences?
temporary COs at this point. They still have landscaping and punch list and you know, solar is getting hooked up and all of those kind of last detail items.
They've been slow walking the heck out of that project.
It's
I did an entire project that's been done for 6 months in the time frame that they're doing that. Same contractor too.
Well, you may have also noticed across the street, the restroom and bus stop facility is under construction, so that's on schedule. And moving forward, we just got some illustrations today of the river rock that's gonna go on the backside, that'll have a artistic element to it, so that'll be great. That's scheduled to be done in July. We're on schedule with that. The band shell foundation is being poured and excavated, so lots of exciting things happening there. Our concert series lineup will be announced at the end of this week, hopefully, if not early next week. So big, exciting things coming with that. On the Midland Spur over here, sanitary work was done. Sanitary lines was worked on this week. We had an overnight closure, which went well, momentarily disruptive, but went well, and that work's mostly done. And that's the big part of our construction projects at the moment.
That black rock looks really nice.
The sculpting, huh? Right? Yeah. The shotcrete wall was hand sculpted to have a basaltic element to it, so it's a pretty cool process. Yeah.
Have you found a daycare operator for Stotts Mill?
We have. We're in lease negotiations right now. It's Ms. Mayer mentioned Michelle earlier, which was not me. It's I would love to take credit for that, but it's not me. It's Michelle Auger, who runs Blue Lake Preschool, and she's partnered with Basalt Education Foundation. So we're looking at sort of a model that's happening over at Blue Lake Preschool right now, which is daycare during the day and then an after school service for older kids. And that's something that they're looking at replicating at Stotts Mill. So we're working through the lease negotiations with the developer right now, as well as 2 grant applications. So
As well as
2 grant applications.
How about the other property in Willits they're still working?
For Blue Lake, yeah, they're still fundraising for that, to our
You
knowledge.
mean the property by Taka?
Mhm.
So people are working on that though.
Yeah, Blue Lake has to fundraise a significant amount of money, so they're still contemplating their fundraising efforts and considering redesigning their building. That's the scoop. Oh, I'll give you one more. We have a full citizen commission on Bach now, the Basalt Affordable Housing group, and so we just had a meeting to discuss a couple of things, but one of them was what to do with the $2 million bond initiative. So hopefully some updates will come from that. It's a generally very new group, so it was a lot of education on where we are.
Seems like you just had a good person in here. If they could somehow access that money.
Speaking of the bond initiative, I saw in the paper about the solar project, which sounds great. Since you're leveraging additional funds, is there a direction the town's looking at for what's in reserve then?
Not yet, in part because the tax credits may not be realized for another year or year and a half. So, trying not to spend what we don't have yet.
To be determined. 'Cause there's a significant amount of savings through those.
75% savings, so $1.5 million in savings on a $2 million project.
Find another source to do more so.
Absolutely.
Maybe, or something else, yeah. Cool.
how's the summer look for us?
We never know.
It's been a quiet winter here.
Well, there are some land use applications in the pipeline.
Yeah, we've got some pre-apps on several special review requests. You're gonna be busy enough, I think.
Anything large or like just smaller stuff?
Yeah, there's one large project, but we don't have a full application in yet. So can't really discuss it until we have a full application.
It'll be fun.
Other questions? Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Bill, do we have a second? Cindy, all in favor? Aye. Motion adjourned at 7:14.
Thanks,
Thank you,
everyone.
everybody.